applause. Okay. So thank you, Laura. You guys can come on up. So we'll get to panel introductions in a second. I'm Mike Boland, as Laura mentioned. I'm an analyst with BI Kelsey, and BI Kelsey, for those of you unfamiliar, focuses on all things local. We're kind of an analyst firm, a market research and consulting firm. So I spend a lot of time looking at local and a lot of the things we've talked about today. And often local is synonymous with SMB and the long tail opportunity around SMB and all the challenges that involves that we went over earlier and throughout a lot of the great discussion today. But it's often forgotten that a lot of the money that's spent in local markets is actually national advertisers that are localizing campaigns in various ways. And that's certainly the case in television and print and also in mobile. I just put out a paper about this. A lot of the ad spend in the US on mobile advertising are national players. And to the extent that they are targeting locally, we're seeing lots of interesting things happen there. And we have a panel here today that's really kind of the buy side and the sell side and really representing some interesting perspectives. So there's going to be a lot to talk about. I will let you guys each introduce yourselves. We'll go down the line, a little bit about yourself, your role, your company, and then we'll go right into it. So go ahead, Rachel, you first.
Hi, everyone. I'm Rachel Hadley. I am with Cinnabon. I'm actually a very different role than most of the people here. I'm head of our corporate communications. Most people think of Cinnabon as a very large company. We're a very large, well-known brand, but we're actually a very small company. So I oversee all communications, everything internal, external, everything at the corporate level with our franchise partners. We have over 1,000 bakeries. Worldwide, 500 of those are here in the US, and that's mostly what I'm going to focus on today. I oversee franchisee communications, our website, all social media, and then other various things, philanthropic partnerships and things like that. So this is just a piece of what I do, and I'll share some of those things as we talk about location-based services. But we've seen a lot of success from that, just because when people get a Cinnabon, they feel the need to confess.
And whoever asks the first audience question today is going to get a free Cinnabon. Julienne?
My name is Julienne Thompson. I'm from Millenial Media, run partnerships and third-party demand for Millennial and based out of Baltimore, so up here today. Millenial Media is a global advertising network, so we work with agencies and direct advertisers to run mobile campaigns. We are 100% mobile focused and have been in the industry since 2007. So we work with a lot of brand advertisers as well as direct response advertisers, and I'll touch base with you today on how we work with some of our larger brands in hyperlocal.
Go ahead, Sean.
Sean Muzzy. I run Neo at Ogilvy in North America. Neo is the digital and performance media arm of Ogilvy and Mather. And as Michael indicated before about the amount of money that's spent in the local market, my experience has kind of spanned from direct marketing to traditional media. And I think one of the things that we do for our clients is help come up with solutions that are going to sell, whether it's the brand or individual products. And what's been very exciting about the hyper-local space over the past couple of years is the ability for us to better target and actually to prove ROI and connect consumers with those brands, whether it's retail or a national brand as well.
That's great. Go ahead, Kerri.
And I'm Kerri Smith. I'm the Director of Mobility at iProspect, which is a global performance marketing agency spanning all realms of digital. So local, search, display, social, mobile, feeds, attribution, all that jazz, but everything leading back to a return. So what we have found really interesting when it's come to local, especially for a lot of our large advertisers, is understanding what that is doing to traffic in store and how we can measure performance of that.
So I want to start by talking about, this could clearly get kind of unwieldy quickly, so I want to kind of do some level setting and set some definitions about the different types of local media that you're all participating in. I mean, when we talk about local, there's things such as local search, buying keywords that are geographically specific. There's geo-targeted display ads. There's traditional media. There's things that even go beyond ad buys, such as local marketing. I know that Cinnabon is very involved in kind of localized optimization of venues and using things such as Foursquare and local SEO. So there's really a broad range of things that we're talking about here when we say local. So I'd like for you to each give a few examples of the types of things that you're doing in local. And Julienne, this probably applies to you differently because you're not on the buy side, but if you could also talk about, what Millenial is doing in terms of offering advertisers localized options. Like, what are we talking about here? What's the range? So Rachel?
Sure. So for us, we still have a pretty unique challenge. When you think about locations on Foursquare and Facebook Places and things like that, so many of those are user-created, user-generated. For us, most Cinnabon locations, especially here in the U.S., are in malls and airports. Malls and airports, while they have addresses, every retailer within that location doesn't have a specific address. So geocoding was very important for us. If you imagine this room of folks, if this is a mall and every one of you is a different retailer, let's say 20 of you are listed as Cinnabon, we would never come up in those natural search rankings because every time someone went to check in, they would check into a different Cinnabon. So one of the things that we did was a venue optimization process to get rid of all those duplicates, own and properly categorize the ones that we had, and then create a special, which was a philanthropic check-in special to help us with that. We do not have the ad budget that most big brands have. We actually don't do any sort of advertising on any social networks or in any publications or anything like that. So everything that we do has to be really, really organic and is really important for us. I'm really interested to see, I'm sure most of you have seen the news about Facebook and the search that came out today, and how Facebook getting into search is going to affect our Facebook Places is going to be interesting. I'm just kind of sitting back and looking at some articles and seeing what's happening, but that's something that's going to matter a lot. Just ask Yelp.
Have you seen any activity, usage activity, around Facebook, the nearby feature that they launched probably 3 to 4 weeks ago, which I think is going to tie into their search efforts, but really the word discovery engine was used a lot today, to be kind of a discovery engine and use your kind of social graph to recommend things that, more or less algorithmically make sense for you. Are you kind of looking at that?
Yeah, I mean, we're definitely going to
Yeah,
now,
right.
more than before. Now that Facebook is encouraging users to not only check in and like pages, but to rate. That's huge for us. We want our ratings to be good, and that's another platform that's going to probably become more and more important. In the last 3 weeks, I haven't really paid attention to that. There's been a lot going on, and I caught the New York flu here in town for 2 weeks. Like, by the way, if you're in from out of town, be careful.
I am. I'm already sick.
It is bad here. So, there's just so much going on all the time, and like I said, being a department of one has its challenges and its restrictions. But anyway.
Yeah, and you're in a unique position on the panel. Excuse me, because of the franchise-based nature of the business being kind of far-flung locations, and a lot of the data that we talked about in the last panel and throughout the day really I think resonates with you. Julienne, a kind of different side of this question of what are the different options that you guys are innovating at Millenial to offer?
Sure. So at Millenial, because we're a mobile ad network, we primarily focus on mobile display, and we also do quite a bit of rich media, and that would include mobile video. So where we're focused today is a two-pronged strategy. One is we do a lot of consulting with our clients at the agency and direct advertiser level around mobile. They look at us to provide feedback on how to guide their overarching mobile strategy, as I'm sure some of my panelists would work with their clients as well. The other thing that Millenial has invested in starting last year is a suite of self-service tools. So for any advertiser or agency or anyone that needs to advertise in the mobile space, we have a platform that is a self-service solution now that really helps clients very easily set up mobile campaigns, setup wizard, creative building tools, and targeting options. And those would include options from, for brand marketers, audience targeting and things like that, which I can talk more about as we go through the panel, but also very easily for, an advertiser like Cinnabon, for example, that does have specific geolocations, run very, very targeted geofence campaigns around their specific locations. So those are the kind of full service and self-service piece. I think also for bigger brands, some of the ways that Millenial will innovate this year are really around, I can't remember, 2 panels ago we were talking a little bit about audience and the importance of audience segmentation. For those of you who are used to working in the online space, that's traditionally done by third-party companies. So Millenial has invested heavily in its first-party data to build out audience profiles and segmentations. And what we're going to be leaning on our advertisers to do is augment that with their own first-party data through their CRM and in other methods this year. So you'll see that as a key focus, and I can go into a little bit more detail as we
A lot of stuff there I want to come back to. Sean, what about you guys in terms of just the range of things? You mentioned some traditional media.
Right. I think it all starts with what our clients are trying to accomplish.
Sure.
And ultimately, I think some of the what I would call innovations that we're seeing, clearly from a mobile marketing standpoint, you mentioned localized search. What's great there has been the innovations in how tight you can get with the geography, and things like bidding by distance from a paid standpoint. Working with partners like Millenial, we work with in terms of buying ads. But I think what we've been, more and more media is becoming more addressable. And we've had a lot of success where we're combining what you would call digital local tactics with some of the more traditional tactics. So when we're doing campaigns for clients that are trying to drive in specific retailers, how are we connecting search with local social or mobile ads, but then buying geo-targeted things like out of home. And now some of the advances in addressable television are happening where we can get even more targeted. So I think one of the things that's very exciting is, as from a media perspective, as we saw decreases in obviously the newspaper industry, there's so much more that we could do now to help surround not only audiences, but really target them as individuals and connect them with brands.
Now, are you seeing any cross-promotional advantages when you have many of those different campaign elements where the kind of whole is greater than the sum of its parts because they are kind of seeding each other or propping each other up? Are you seeing advantages along those lines?
From a product like an audience,
per media perspective.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're doing both television and mobile and online, they're kind of feeding into each other.
Absolutely. So, I mean, I have some examples we've done where we do a lot of work with Ticketmaster, where we've combined some of the mobile tactics we've done with the out of home to drive usage of their kiosks in Walmart.
Makes sense.
So yeah, I think there's a lot of opportunity to connect the pieces, as opposed to just use the media as more static.
And the trackable path to purchase between all of them probably provides some great analytics and ROI assessment for a kind of ongoing optimization.
Yeah, I would say, and that's something that you hit on really, the amount of data that's available, that's being, that we're able to look at is really exciting. Yeah. Particularly when you look at more of the event type activity we might do. So some of our clients were doing, for IBM, we do the US Open, we help them sponsor that. So there's a lot of localized data that you could use to analyze not only performance, but how you're going to communicate to people.
Absolutely. I want to get into some more analytics questions as well, but Kerri, from your perspective, what you guys are doing, the range of options.
Sure, so that's actually a great segue, because that's a lot about what is exciting us too. So, we're playing a lot in mobile search and mobile display, so yes, we are optimizing, from a natural perspective. We could be running property-specific or location-specific pages to capitalize on the relevance there and optimizing for SEO that's more location-specific. It could be geo-targeting, taking advantage of location extensions within search, geo-targeting and geo-fencing and display. But to the point that of the data, that's what we find the most exciting. So whether that's evaluating performance of a location strategy by understanding within certain retail locations what is the conversion rate there, what's that average order value, how much through A/B testing and foot traffic and research and all of that, how can we understand how much of what we're doing digitally is driving traffic in store, and then understanding the performance of that, to working with our more progressive partners to do, like place panels and looking at other places that we can be targeting that are locationally relevant to the consumers of our brands, or even looking at drop-off if they're getting directions in a rich media ad. Where is that dropping off, and what do we know about that location around there, and what can we do to reinforce the message to whatever is distracting them from their journey to our brand.
That's great. So I think that well covers the kind of what is local, what are some of the options. Now getting into the why. If we could go to the slides I have here. These are data, just one example from Millennial, showing that among a number of different campaigns across a number of DMAs, when comparing ads that were placed based on a kind of hyper-targeted, hyper-locally targeted geo placement, there's consistently a higher, the performance deltas, and in this case measured by click-through rates. So the reason I bring this up is, in the case of display ads, and this is click-through rates, or any of the different things you're doing, generally speaking, are you seeing similar results where local placement, local creative, any of these localized elements are indeed improving ad performance or campaign performance in any way? And any kind of anecdotes you have would be great. Anyone can jump in.
Well, I would say, yes, definitely, right? We saw that early on. You mentioned online as whenever we would geo-target and we had insights to feed into that help. But now that you're able to get as specific of a location, there's, I heard a stat today about how 90% of smartphone users have their smartphone within arm's reach, right? And someone on the earlier panel said how often people check it.
Yep.
That fact, it's a transactional device that we can now check. So, in particular, what we've seen help in the mobile search area is using like a click-to-call function.
Yep.
So if we were running campaigns that might have been geo-targeted or talking about something where traditionally we might have sent somebody to a landing page, or now offering that person the ability to call a representative, a reservation line, all those factors, we're seeing not only the conversion increase, but the buying process shorten.
Sure.
So it's definitely happening.
And that certainly seems like it would resonate with certain types of businesses that want the phone to ring, call centers, anyone that does business or converts business over the phone.
Restaurants who want to see their phone ring for reservation.
And I think another good example there is, when we talk about not just clicks, but what happens after the click. Yep. I think calls is a great one. Another one for, retail and restaurants. You mentioned restaurants is directions. Provide a way for them to get there. That's not only something that helps them get there and drives them there literally, but it measures it. Yep. So I think that's a very interesting point, and not only the placement of the ad and localizing, but providing the right calls to action to capture that intent, which tends to be more localized in mobile. Kerri, you look like you want to say something.
So I just want to add to that. I think, yes, when we're looking at these types of strategies, they do have a place, and when you execute on them in a way that makes sense, you do see your results bolstered. But I think it's important to keep in mind that it won't work for everyone, right? And there are going to be some brands that have a longer consideration set. So if you are a hotel chain that, you start at $1,000 a night, then geo-targeting and trying to capitalize on that more immediate need probably isn't going to help you. So a lot of times it does make sense, especially if you've got specific properties or specific locations, but there's still a lot of testing you've got to do to understand not only is it relevant for your brand, but at what point do you reach that diminishing return, right? So are there larger radiuses that you should be looking at, or should you be looking at similar markets, not necessarily your immediate market, and really testing the different strategies to see what makes sense?
Yeah, I mean, I would add just one thing about location. You know, we see it all the time. I would ask partners that you work with how they determine location and how they determine the accuracy of that. You know, one example that's pretty crystal clear with Millennial would be we're actually looking at users who, let's say, might be in a car dealership. And there's two types of people in there. We've all been to a car dealership. There are people that work there and want to sell you the car, and there are people that, you know, are shopping. So it's important to understand things like timing and how often is that user in that specific location. Are they there from 9 to 5 days a week, or are they there, you know, each weekend? So I would encourage you, as you work with partners, to just ask them how they determine location and leverage it for targeting your campaigns, because it's very important for partners to be able to recognize those issues and challenges, particularly in mobile.
I think you bring up a good point too, in that the kind of locus of relevance is going to vary in different product categories. In autos, for example, you might be willing to drive 100 miles, but for CPG products, you're talking about a radius of relevance that's blocks, not miles. So, you know, set your geofences accordingly, it would seem. Kerri, do you want to say something?
I was just going to reinforce the point of, I like to say know enough to be dangerous, and what I mean by that is know enough to know when you need to be asking more questions, because especially with how they're getting that data is going to greatly affect how scalable and how realistic it is for you to be location targeting. So always ask a lot of questions, and, you know, stay up on articles to know when something that sounds like it's too good to be true probably is.
Mm-hmm. So beyond, you know, we've talked about the geo-targeted components to the campaigns, where they're showing up, having the proper calls to action that capture that. A third element we haven't talked about is the creative. Is creative being localized in a way that you guys are seeing any best practices or worst practices that you want to espouse?
I can jump in. So I'm going to kind of take it from the other tack of just things that I think that people aren't doing enough of. You know, we talk about mobile as being this incredibly personal medium, but there's not really a lot that you can use that is personal that helps to talk to a consumer, right? Because privacy is such a big deal with mobile. And in general, but especially with mobile. So location is one of those things that greatly enables you to more personalize your ad copy. And what I tend to see is a lot of brands are just throwing out location extensions or just kind of telling you what area they're close to instead of really making that relevant to you. What is the need and how can I pull that in? If I'm a hotel brand, what attractions do I want to tell you are nearby? How can I build that into my copy to make it more relevant to a specific segment that I might be going after, families versus business travelers? And that's still really basic stuff, but I think there's even more power in it in mobile. And it's so funny because the word mobile tends to scare everyone that we're focusing on the targeting and not necessarily the things that we already know how to do well from online to make that more relevant.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think also definitely what you're saying to somebody, but also just understanding how they're going to be seeing that, right? I mean, the great thing for mobile was the tablet and increasing the size of the device people were looking at. But that definitely plays a part of it. And also, so I mean, from a creative standpoint, what we try to do is step back and think about what that overall experience is going to be for the customer and the brand, and then ultimately all those things that that you said come into play in terms of how are you being more personal, how are you using the data that's coming out in terms of making sure that people are understanding what you're selling, where it's being sold, but then also how it's going to end up displaying for them, whether it's search, even email, understanding that component of it as well.
Interesting. So I think another challenge here is that reach and targeting are in some ways inversely related.
Yep.
So, every time you segment, whether it's by location or demographic, or really anyway, but of course location is what we're talking about today, you're shrinking your audience. Now we're talking about how qualitatively you're seeing higher performance, but then you're cutting down on quantity, so you're kind of trading quality for quantity. Where are you guys in that kind of trade-off? And is it worth trading quality for quantity?
Well, I would actually say, this is less of like a millennial thing, right? Mm-hmm. Like, I don't care if I'm selling more products, I don't care how many views or impressions or whatever it was I got. And I think we've actually seen that, but it's also an obstacle, right? Mm-hmm. Because, we have examples where we've spent very little and generated a lot of sales, but can you, replicate that
Sure.
en masse. But if you might have compared it to something where you might have had more reach, but ultimately, what did you get for that reach? So I think it's definitely something, to your point earlier about testing and making sure that you're understanding performance. But at the end of the day, I think we take more sales over more reach.
Sure. And kind of along those lines, Julienne, I'll tee you up here to talk about what Millennial is doing, because I think you guys have done a good job at what you mentioned earlier, allowing geo-targeting both on a self-serve basis and then also on more of a service basis. But for these kind of geographic polygons that are very specific to a service area, but yet achieving scale at the same time because of the size of your network and your ability to target and all these other things. And you probably can't see the graphic from where you're sitting, but I know you're familiar with this one, but it's very interesting. I'm not sure if you can all see basically the red line here, but it's a geographically specified area for this one particular advertiser on the Millennial network, but yet the impression density is still pretty impressive based on still kind of going down to that level.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple comments there. I think our size does certainly have something to do with that, right? Size-wise, Millennial, we sit right between Google and Apple, which is a really nice place for us to be. Being in the industry since 2007, we're a bit of an old-timer in this space. So I think when we're talking about our reach and the number of people that we see every month, that's certainly, fairly... something that we focus on, and we certainly take a leadership position there. I think when we're talking about, purchasing and working with these types of campaigns, though, we really do take a layered approach to the media that we offer to clients. So this is certainly one component of a larger plan. And I think that it's easy if the client's running all of their campaigns, mobile campaigns, or the bulk of them with us, right? The creative is easier. We can control messaging, but I think the other question to add here is what do you do when our clients are working with multiple partners, and you're certainly not leveraging us. So I would say that the control that we have and the size that we have really does help with those geo-targeting campaigns. And we rarely will have delivery issues even on those very hyper-local campaigns. But we do take a layered approach to the media that we run, and really this is part of the overall strategy.
Now, given that there's this, the way I put it, I don't know if it's accurate or not, but, almost a trade-off of, you're sacrificing reach because you're adding on more relevance and hopefully higher performance. Is that a challenge for, the agency representatives on the panel in terms of, I guess, inertia among clients that might traditionally be kind of very reach-oriented or very kind of impression-based as opposed to performance-based? As we're moving into kind of a mobile world with all these interesting tools and analytics, is that an uphill battle in terms of kind of an education process? Or since we're talking about big brands here, overall, I mean, what do you think is the kind of letter grade for the industry for, adopting all of these kind of great things that we're talking about here?
I mean, I think goes back to back to the objective. Mm-hmm. So if it's to sell something, then we're going to look at that. If it's to change someone's perception, we're going to look to see if we could get insights and analytics against something like that. So if it's looking at traffic or sales, that's stuff we'll look at. I think the challenge a lot of times is sort of like this, a little bit of this versus that. Yeah. But if you're testing different things and you have that in place, you could start to build that case. And I remember like this going back a few years, but we had a client where very, very ROI driven, and we wanted to do a lot more local, hyper-local search programs, and it was the initial results, all we were able to get were actual calls to their reservation line. And this is an entertainment company. And, so that was somebody in the past, like if we had done that for another campaign, would have been, that's not working, let's not do that. But because they saw the value of this is people who wanted to do something, when you look at, when somebody's doing something on a mobile device, there's shopping and searching, but if they're going to make a call, if they're going to do something, they want to actually do that within the next 10, 15 minutes.
The immediacy of it.
The immediacy of it. So I think once people understand that, I think there's a little bit more of getting it.
As an extension to that, not only the tools in place, the right calls to action, but also the measurement tools,
Yeah.
and also how things are bought and sold. How ad units are bought and sold. Are we moving towards more of a CPA-based world versus a CPM or CPC-based world? Or should we be if we're not?
I'd love it. I think we're quite a bit of ways out. For those of you who have run mobile media, you know how difficult it is to track in general. So that tends to be the feedback that we get is how would they measure, how could they, price out on a CPA when just measuring what you're driving from those campaigns is so difficult. So I've heard that word or that phrase a lot more and more, CPA. Again, another warning, just make sure you ask how they're qualifying that, because you are starting to hear that, and I think that the vendors are starting to understand that performance is a really big aspect. Just right now in mobile, we don't have the surefire way of tracking everything yet, I think, to really back into that.
And I think the experience, again, and how someone's using, whether it's a smartphone or a tablet, is much different than a desktop. So I think I think a lot of how we're measuring is going to have to evolve and adapt based on that.
Yeah,
And that kind of falls into the whole kind of native paradigm that is kind of a buzzword today and everywhere these days. But I'm sorry, Julian, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say that I think for a lot of our brand advertisers that we work with, they tend to leverage quite a bit of online paradigm when they're talking about mobile.
It's the habit creep.
Yeah, so we end up having a discussion about it's very hard to track between PC and your smartphone, and we talk to them about how audience targeting can be done on a first-party basis and a third-party basis, but it's really the intersection of location that might make that richer. So I think we focus on a lot of traditional online topics because the client's familiar with it, and then help them guide down the process through mobile.
So we have about 10 minutes left. Cue the audience to start raising your hand if you have questions. We'll get you a microphone. But Rachel, I want to give you the chance to jump in here because a lot of this discussion is around, ad buys, which you mentioned you're not doing.
Right.
What are the other things that you're, thinking about most these days, or what are your pain points in terms of just kind of fulfilling your mission to drive people into Cinnabon locations?
Well, the best marketing for us is our aroma. So, so I do think that local is I hate using this phrase, but it is like the lowest hanging fruit for us because geofencing is so big and getting someone in that area is huge. Another thing that we're doing is that location-based services are allowing us to do, and Instagram was probably like the best thing in the world for a company like us, like Cinnabon, because everyone's taking pictures and posting it, and that's creating a lot of content for us that we can share and use in different creative ways and target those locations and give them back their own local content. We've seen on Facebook Places higher engagement levels than on our brand page. So that's one of those stories too where you have a brand page with hundreds of thousands of fans. But if you've got a local page with fewer fans, but they're ridiculously engaged, what do you do there? How do you figure it out? Because I don't, so many people that are huge Cinnabon fans on our brand page, they don't necessarily have access to the product just because we're not everywhere. We wish we were, but we aren't. So those are some opportunities for us, I think, is generating and curating all that content on the local level and staying engaged on a more local level at a manageable basis.
So another opportunity for you, iOS 7 is going to have baked into the SDK the ability to pipe any smell you want out of the speaker.
I know,
So
if we
we'll
could
be all
figure
set.
that out, it would be like golden, amazing.
Any audience questions? We have time for one or two.
Interested in, with the growth in terms of engagement in mobile, are we seeing a growth in terms of the percentage of impressions that are location aware? Has that flatlined? And what percentage of actual impressions are location aware currently in the mobile ecosystem?
I can tell you one proxy towards that answer, which doesn't necessarily tell you across the board, but there are certain kind of, indicators out there. Google has announced that 50% of searches that happen on the mobile device have a local intent and are served local results. That compares with on the desktop, it's about 17 to 20%. So you can tell the difference there in terms of just local intent. In the display world, I'm actually not sure the percentage of impressions. Do you guys have any sense?
Yeah, so in display, and it depends on really how you're going to consider locationally aware, right? But for the ultimate accuracy, if you're looking at lat long and GPS enabled, you're looking at anywhere from 10 to 15% of impressions that are able to get down to that level. There's a wider range when you're going off of DMA, obviously, because it's aggregated higher up. But that comes from the publisher level, and if they're asking you if you want to share that location. So that's a lot of where you're seeing that dam, if you will, that's kind of stopping it from growing and as fast as it could.
You're right, there are a lot of gating factors there, such as if people have location services turned on if they're in iOS, and then the equivalent in Android. And then also, yeah, just the quality of the data that the publisher is able to pass on. So I've heard numbers in that range as well. Does that answer your question, sir?
Yes.
Good. Any others out there? Okay, well, we have maybe 2 minutes left, which is probably the right amount of time just to let you guys have some last words. Anything you want to espouse about kind of the best practices you see out there or what you want this audience to come away with? Rachel, you can start.
We have a bakery at Penn Station. I'm just kidding. No, I mean, I don't know that I have too much more to add. Where is it at Penn Station? Is that what you said? Concourse level? You know, I'm glad to be here, and if anyone has any questions for me, they can tweet me, or I'll be around for the rest of the day. We do have unique challenges. I've read statistics that say that it's about like 50% of locations are incorrect geocodes on Foursquare and even Facebook Places to some extent. I know that's a little bit different, but definitely on Foursquare. That's a huge opportunity for a lot of what I would imagine be a lot of your clients and things like that. So it really helped us, to say that as an understatement. Our engagement increased by almost 700%. So that was great for us.
Cool. Well said. Julienne?
I mean, I would just say, based on my experience working with clients at Millenial, that choosing a good partner who listens and who can really offer you a tool set that you need is really important. You know, I work with clients who spend $1,000 a week and clients who spend $1 million a week and everything in between. And I think having a good partner to kind of consult with you and to not, there's so much. Snake oil and too good to be true. And so I would just encourage you guys to really get something in your hands that's going to be very measurable and targeted to what you as a brand advertiser or you as a direct response advertiser want to do with these local campaigns or in the mobile space. Just really important to ask the right questions.
Great. John?
Yeah, I think testing is a big thing. Obviously making sure you're able to set those tests up properly. But then I also think making sure you're thinking about the overall experience is really important, and particularly what you want people to do, who you're talking with. And then lastly, I think the other thing is, we're evolving to this space where, as I said before, local doesn't just mean, it's more than location now, right? Because of the devices and how we're using them, that hyperlocal is everywhere now. It's not just it doesn't have to just be about geography anymore.
Kerri, last word.
Mine's going to be a little bit broader than local, but for brands that are in the audience, internal communication is going to be such a big factor when it comes to mobile, as it's blurring the lines between all media, right? So print doesn't act independently anymore. Your brick and mortar stores will rely on digital even more than they used to. So really being able to communicate internally what everybody is working on, having a centralized goal, and being able to talk to each other about performance between branding and what's happening in the store level and what's happening in your e-commerce is going to be really important as mobile continues to grow.
Great. So we're right at 4, and I believe we're going right into the next session. So stay seated, and please join me in thanking this panel.